The world was burning. Fires spread across the battlefield, turning the air into thick smoke and ash. Screams of soldiers and the metallic roar of machines echoed in the distance. But under it all, there was something else, a faint broken cry that no one seemed to hear. She sat there trembling, her golden tail dragging on the dirt, her ears flat against her head. The alien girl was wounded and alone, her people scattered, her voice lost in the chaos. She had been calling for help again and again, but it seemed her cries vanished into the smoke. Her kind was strong, proud, and fearless. Yet now she looked small and fragile, clutching her side as if trying to hold herself together. Around her the war raged. Without pause, soldiers marching past her as though she did not exist. To them, she was only another fallen enemy, another casualty in a fight that had gone on too long. But she was not just another soldier. She was someone who had never wanted this war, someone who still believed there could have been peace. She whispered softly, her voice breaking, though the sound was swallowed by explosions. Her eyes searched the battlefield, desperate for any sign that someone would notice. But her people could not hear her, and the enemies would not care. She thought this was the end. And then he appeared. Through the smoke walked a figure, tall and steady, wearing heavy armor unlike anything she had seen before. His movements were calm but firm, every step showing the kind of discipline her people admired in warriors. He was human, one of the strange species that had been dragged into this war, a species her commanders had dismissed as weak and unimportant. Yet now, standing in front of her, he looked anything but weak. At first, she lowered her head, expecting a weapon to be raised against her. She had heard stories of humans, the way they fought with reckless courage, how they never backed down. She thought this one would finish what the battle had already started. Her heart beat faster, her hands curled into fists as she prepared herself for the end. But instead of striking, the human knelt down in front of her. His helmet tilted slightly as if studying her face, and then he spoke. His voice was low but clear, cutting through the noise of war like no other sound had. "I can hear you." Her breath caught. She stared at him in disbelief, her ears twitching. No one else had heard her cries, but somehow this human had. She did not understand how, but his words carried a strange warmth that felt out of place in the middle of fire and blood. He reached out slowly, not with a weapon, but with his hand, as if offering her a choice. For a moment she hesitated, her instincts telling her not to trust, but something inside her shifted. She had never seen mercy on this battlefield. Yet here it was, standing in front of her in the form of a human soldier. She placed her trembling hand in his. His grip was firm, grounding her in a way she had not felt since before the war began. He pulled her up to her feet with surprising care, supporting her weight as though she was not an enemy but someone worth saving. The battlefield continued around them, but in that moment, it felt as if time had slowed. The alien girl's cries had finally been answered, not by her own kind, not by her allies, but by the one she had least expected. And for the first time in days, hope flickered in her chest. The human kept his hand steady under her arm as he guided her away from the shattered ground where she had been sitting. His armor was dented, dust and ash clung to him, yet he moved with quiet strength. She leaned against him, her body weak but her mind still racing. Why would he do this? Why would a human risk helping her when their species had been dragged into this war as unwilling pawns? Her ears twitched as she tried to listen beyond the thundering explosions. There were shouts in her language carried on the wind. Enemy patrols were sweeping the area, searching for survivors like her. If they found her with him, they would not hesitate to kill them both. She wanted to warn him, but her throat tightened, her voice fading under the weight of exhaustion. The human must have sensed her fear because he spoke again, calm and firm. "You're safe with me." She stared at him, surprised by the certainty in his tone. Safe. She had not felt that word in so long it almost sounded foreign. His helmet shielded most of his face, but his eyes, sharp and steady, glowed faintly behind the visor. They did not carry cruelty. Instead, they carried something she had nearly forgotten, determination mixed with kindness. As they moved, she noticed how he constantly shifted his position, placing himself between her and the smoke-shrouded paths ahead. His movements were protective, instinctive, as though it was natural for him to shield her. That thought unsettled her. Among her people, warriors were expected to defend their kin, but never their enemies. Yet this human did not seem to care about such divisions. The fires cast a strange light around them, glowing against the steel of his armor and the golden strands of her fur. She could feel the heat at her back, the crackle of burning wreckage. It was a battlefield, but walking beside him felt like moving through a world apart. Her mind pulled back to memories she had tried to bury. The war had begun with whispers of territory, of control over star systems. She had argued against it, pleaded with her commanders that peace was still possible, but no one listened. She had been sent to the front lines, told her voice was too soft for the council, told her role was only to fight, not to question. And now, because of their arrogance, her people were scattered, her cries ignored. Yet here this stranger heard her. Suddenly a sound ripped through the smoke, boots crunching against the scorched earth, shouts in her language. Her ears shot up and she froze. A patrol. The human stopped moving, his body tensing like a drawn bowstring. His hand slowly reached for the weapon on his back, but he did not let go of her. She wanted to tell him to leave her to save himself before they were both caught, but her voice broke again. Instead, she tightened her grip on his arm, her wide eyes trying to speak what her voice could not. He glanced at her, then back at the shadows moving closer. The orange glow of flames painted their armor in sharp outlines. They were almost upon them. The human moved quickly, pulling her into the cover of a broken wall. He crouched low, pressing her gently against the stone as if shielding her from view. His armor clinked softly, his breath steady through the helmet's filter. He whispered, "Just one word, quiet." She held her breath. Her ears caught every step of the patrol, every scrape of their boots against the rocks. They passed so close she could hear their voices, harsh and sharp, mocking the weak, laughing at the broken. She felt her chest tighten. They were her people, yet they sounded like strangers now. The human stayed still as stone, his hand steady on her shoulder, silently promising he would not let them find her. When the patrol finally moved on, swallowed by the smoke and noise of the battlefield, she let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. For a moment she stared at him, her golden eyes reflecting both fear and wonder. No one else had heard her cries. No one else had stayed. But this human had. And though the war still raged, she felt something inside her shift. She was no longer just a wounded soldier waiting to be forgotten. She was someone worth saving. The smoke thinned as they moved deeper into the ruins, the ground littered with scorched metal and broken stone. The alien girl leaned against the human, each step heavy, her strength failing. Yet he did not slow. His arm stayed firm around her, steadying her weight as though he had carried burdens far heavier than her before. She wanted to speak, to ask him why he helped her, but her throat burned from smoke, and her voice came out as little more than a whisper. He did not ask questions. He simply guided her forward with quiet patience, his eyes always scanning the battlefield. They passed the bodies of fallen soldiers, both human and alien. The sight made her stomach twist. Once she would have felt pride in seeing enemies fall, but now it only filled her with sorrow. She wondered if the human felt the same. His helmet hid his expression, yet the way he paused at each lifeless form suggested he carried their weight too. A distant roar broke through the silence, shaking the ground beneath them. Her ears flicked up, catching the sound she recognized too well. War beasts, massive creatures bred only for destruction, loosed when commanders wanted the battlefield swept clean. Her people had created them. Now those same beasts would crush anything in their path, even their own wounded. She shivered, pressing closer to the human's armored side. He stopped, listening, and she could feel the tension ripple through him. Without a word, he pulled her into the shadow of a collapsed building, crouching low to hide their forms. The ground trembled again, heavier this time. Closer. From the smoke, a towering shape emerged. four-legged, armored skin glistening like molten stone, its glowing eyes sweeping the battlefield. Its breath came out in bursts of fire and ash. Her heart pounded in her chest. She remembered training with such beasts, told they were unstoppable. No soldier, no squad, no weapon could stand against them without heavy support. She looked at the human. Surely he knew this too. Surely he would leave her here to save himself. But he did not move away. His body leaned slightly forward, as if ready to fight the impossible. The beast snarled, flames lighting its jaws as it crushed debris underfoot. Her body trembled. She wanted to scream, to beg him not to try, but her voice failed again. All she could do was clutch his arm tighter, her eyes wide with fear. He turned his head toward her, and for the first time she saw his face. The visor of his helmet lifted slightly, revealing his eyes, sharp, unwavering, filled with fire of their own. Not fear, not hesitation. Resolve. "Stay behind me," he said. The words sank into her like stone, grounding her even as her instincts screamed to run. He rose slowly, his weapon drawn, stepping out into the open. The beast's head swung toward him, its glowing eyes locking onto the lone human figure. A deep growl rolled through the air, followed by a thunderous roar. The alien girl pressed, her back against the broken wall, her breath caught in her throat. She watched as the human stood tall, small compared to the monster, yet unshaken. The beast charged, the ground quaking with each massive step. The human waited. At the last moment he moved, swift, precise, almost impossible to track. His weapon roared, bright light cutting through the smoke. The beast howled as the blasts struck its armored hide. It stumbled but did not fall, turning its fury fully on him. She had seen squads fall under a single charge, yet here was one man holding his ground. His movements were sharp, his aim steady, his courage unbroken. With every shot, every step, he fought not as someone seeking glory, but as someone determined to protect. Her heart raced as she realized the truth. He was not fighting only for himself. He was fighting for her. When the beast staggered and finally crashed to the ground, silence fell heavy around them. Smoke curled upward from its body. The human stood over it, his chest heaving, his weapon lowered. He turned back toward her, his visor sliding shut again, hiding his face once more. But she had already seen enough. She had seen the fire in his eyes, the fire that no war beast could crush. For the first time since the war began, the alien girl felt something stronger than fear. She felt trust. The battlefield grew quieter as the roar of the fallen beast faded into the distance. Smoke curled lazily into the air, glowing orange in the firelight. The alien girl sat frozen, her heart still pounding from what she had witnessed. She had trained for years, seen countless warriors, but she had never seen anyone fight like that. Not a squad, not a commander, not even the champions of her people. Only a single human. The human walked back toward her, his footsteps steady, despite the weight of his armor. He extended his hand again, the same hand that had pulled her from the ground before. She hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. His grip was strong, and it lifted her to her feet as if she were lighter than smoke. Her golden eyes studied him, but his helmet had slid back into place. She wanted to see his face again, to know if the fire she had glimpsed was still there, but he gave her only his calm silence. She wondered if he trusted her less than she trusted him, or if this was simply how humans carried themselves. They moved deeper into the ruins, each step crunching over broken stone. The air grew heavier, filled with the echoes of distant battles. Somewhere far off, weapons still fired and soldiers still screamed. Yet here, between these crumbling walls, the noise seemed distant, almost muffled. The girl's thoughts tangled as she tried to understand him. Among her people, no warrior would waste time on an enemy, not even one wounded and left behind. But this human seemed different. He had risked his life for her. He had fought a beast with impossible courage. "Why?" At last she found the strength to whisper, "Why did you save me?" The human did not stop walking. His voice was calm, steady, as if he had been expecting the question. "Because you called for help." Her ears flicked in confusion. "But no one else heard me." "I did," he answered. His Words struck deeper than she expected. Simple but undeniable. For days she had cried out and been ignored by her own kind. Yet this stranger had heard her, even when she thought her voice had vanished into nothing. They came to the edge of the ruins, where a wide stretch of battlefield lay open. Fires burned across the plain, casting twisted shadows. The ground shook faintly under the weight of distant artillery. The human stopped, raising his hand to signal silence. She froze, ears twitching. Voices drifted through the smoke. Not the harsh shouts of her people this time, but another language. Short, clipped words she didn't understand. Human words. Soldiers. Her breath quickened. If they saw her, they would not understand. To them, she was the enemy. She gripped the human's arm, her claws pressing lightly into the metal of his armor. Her wide eyes silently begged him to act. He looked at her, then at the shadows of his own people moving closer through the smoke. His voice dropped, low and certain. Stay close. Do not speak. She nodded, her tail curling tightly around her leg. He guided her into the wreckage of a collapsed transport, pulling her low into the shadows. The footsteps grew louder. Human soldiers marched past, their armor shining faintly in the glow of fire. Their weapons were ready, their eyes sharp. The girl held her breath, every muscle trembling. If they discovered her, they would end her life without question. She glanced at the human beside her, trying to read him. His visor reflected the flames, hiding his expression, but his hand remained steady on her shoulder. The patrol passed. For a long moment, silence returned. She let out a slow breath, her body sagging in relief. Then she looked up at him again, her voice barely audible. You protected me from your own kind. He tilted his helmet toward her, his answer quiet but firm. I'll protect you from anyone. Her chest tightened at his words. No one had ever said such a thing to her. Not her commanders, not her fellow soldiers, not even those she had once called family. And yet here, in the middle of a war meant to tear their species apart, a human had given her a promise she could feel in her bones. For the first time, she realized she was no longer just surviving because of him. She was beginning to live again. Night fell over the battlefield, though the sky never truly darkened. Fires still burned across the plains, painting the smoke in deep orange and red. The alien girl sat close to the human, her back resting against a cracked wall. She rapped, her arms around her knees, her golden tail curled protectively around her. Her body was weak, her wounds aching, but her mind was restless. The human sat nearby, silent as ever. His helmet was tilted upward as if he was listening to the distant echoes of war. His stillness unsettled her. Among her people, warriors filled silence with words, boasting of their victories or cursing their enemies. But this human seemed content to simply breathe, his calm presence stronger than any speech. At last, she whispered, You risk your life for me, but your soldiers would call me enemy. Why? He turned his head slightly toward her, his visor catching the flicker of firelight. Because I don't fight for enemies or allies. I fight for those who need help. Her ears flicked back in surprise. His words were strange, yet they held a weight she could not deny. She studied him, searching for deception, but his voice carried none. Humans were different from what she had been told, different in ways she was only beginning to understand. The night grew colder, the firelight fading as the wind carried ash into the ruins. She shivered and wrapped her arms tighter around herself. Without a word, the human shifted his position and removed a piece of fabric from his pack. He draped it gently over her shoulders, his hand brushing against her fur only for a second. The warmth was immediate, not just from the cloth but from the gesture itself. Her golden eyes softened. She had never been treated with such quiet care, not even among her own kind. A sudden noise broke the moment, a low hum, steady and mechanical, cutting through the night air. Her ears shot up, dropships. She knew the sound too well. They were scouting the battlefield, searching for survivors. The girl's heart raced. If the ship spotted them, they would be trapped. The human rose instantly, scanning the sky. The glow of searchlights swept across the ruins. He motioned for her to follow, and she forced her weak body onto her feet. Together they moved quickly, his hand steadying her as they weaved between broken walls and twisted beams. The ground trembled as the dropships passed overhead. Their searchlights carved paths of white light through the smoke. The girl's chest tightened. Her own people would not hesitate to execute her for failing her post, and the humans above would do the same for being their enemy. There was no safe place left for her, except beside him. They ducked into the shell of a ruined building. The walls shook as the ships hovered above, their engines humming like thunder. The human pressed her gently against the wall, his body shielding hers from the beams of light. She could feel the cold steel of his armor against her shoulder, the steady rhythm of his breath close to her ear. Her tail tightened around her leg as fear clawed at her chest. Yet when she looked up at him, standing firm despite the danger, a strange calm settled inside her. He was unshaken, as if he had faced worse than this before. Minutes stretched like hours until finally the hum of engines faded. The searchlights passed and the sky fell silent once more. The human lowered his weapon, his posture easing only slightly. He looked down at her. "You're safe," he said. Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe those words, to let them bury her fear. But a new thought rose in her mind. Not forever. They will find us. He nodded once, his voice calm but firm. Then I'll make sure they don't. She stared at him, her eyes wide, her ears twitching with disbelief. He spoke with such certainty, as though the idea of failure did not exist in him. She realized he was not only her protector, he was becoming something more, a force she could lean on, a strength she had never known. The night wind carried ash across the ruins, but for the first time, she no longer felt lost in the smoke. She was beginning to feel found. The ruins grew quieter as the night stretched on, but silence on a battlefield was never peace. Every gust of wind carried the echo of distant explosions. Every shifting shadow could hide a patrol. The alien girl leaned against the cold wall, her golden fur dimmed by ash. Her body trembled from exhaustion, yet her eyes never left the human who sat a short distance away. He was cleaning his weapon with slow, precise movements, as though every detail mattered. The faint light from the fires reflected off the edges of his armor, turning him into a figure carved from steel. She wondered if humans were always like this, calm even when surrounded by destruction. Finally, she found her voice, low and broken. "You could have left me. Any other soldier would have." The human glanced at her, his visor hiding his face. "But I didn't." Her ears lowered as she studied him. "Why? What are humans really? My commanders called your kind reckless, foolish, too weak to survive wars like this. But you don't seem weak at all." For the first time, he set the weapon down and leaned forward. His voice was quiet yet strong enough to cut through the night. "We are not the strongest. We are not the fastest. But we endure. We keep moving even when the world tells us to stop. That is how we survive." His words sank into her chest, stirring something she hadn't felt in years. Endurance. Her people had spoken of honor, of conquest, of power, but never endurance. She realized that perhaps strength did not always mean standing tall. It also meant refusing to fall when everything tried to break you. A sudden crack of stone startled her. She jumped, ears twitching. The human was on his feet instantly, weapon raised. From the shadows emerged not beasts, not machines, but a small group of alien soldiers. Her soldiers. Her chest tightened. Their armor was familiar, their eyes sharp, with suspicion. One of them shouted in her language, demanding to know why she stood beside the human. Another raised his weapon, the barrel glowing in the dim light. Fear gripped her throat. If she said nothing, they would kill him. If she defended him, they would call her a traitor. Her voice trembled as she tried to speak, but the words tangled. The soldiers grew louder, their anger spilling into threats. The human stepped forward, placing himself between her and the soldiers. His voice was steady, though they could not understand his words. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." The soldiers snarled, their weapons ready. She felt her knees weaken. No human could stand against a squad alone. She reached out, clutching his arm desperately. "You can't fight them, they are too many." He turned his head slightly, and though his visor still hid his face, she could hear the fire in his tone. "Then we don't fight. We endure." Before the soldiers could fire, he threw down a small device. Smoke burst out, thick and blinding, swallowing the ruins in a gray cloud. Shouts erupted as her soldiers stumbled in confusion. She felt his arm tighten around her waist, lifting her off her feet as he carried her through the chaos. Her heart pounded as they ran, the world spinning. In a blur of smoke and fire, she buried her face against his armored chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart under the metal. Each step he took was heavy, yet unwavering, as if nothing could stop him. When at last they emerged from the cloud, the ruins stretched before them like a maze. He set her down gently, his breath hard but controlled. She stared at him wide-eyed, struggling to find words. "You risked everything," she whispered. He shook his head. "No, I only did what was right." Her chest tightened. No one in her life had ever spoken like him. No one had ever looked at her not as a soldier, not as an enemy, but as someone worth saving. She realized then that the bond between them was no longer just survival. Something deeper was growing, something neither of them could deny. For the first time in a long time, the alien girl felt not just protected, but seen. The night dragged on as they moved through the ruins deeper into the battlefield's forgotten places. The alien girl's wound slowed her, but the human never let her fall behind. His arm steadied her when her legs shook, his calm presence keeping her from sinking into despair. Her mind, however, was far from calm. The encounter with her own soldiers haunted her. She could still hear their voices filled with anger and betrayal. To them she was a deserter, maybe even a traitor. And perhaps they were right. She had chosen not to return to them. She had chosen to stay with him. The thought twisted inside her. She had been trained to give everything for her people, yet when she cried out for help, none had answered. Only he had. A human. A supposed enemy. At last her voice broke the silence. "If they find me again, they will kill me. And if your people find us, they will kill me too." The human glanced at her but kept walking. "Then we'll make sure neither happens," she frowned, her ears folding back. "You speak as if it's so simple." "It is," he replied, his tone calm but unyielding. "I will protect you." She stared at him in disbelief. Protection was a word often spoken by commanders, but rarely meant. Yet when he said it, she believed it. She didn't know why, but every action of his proved the truth of his words. The ruins opened into a wide stretch of ground where the fires had died, leaving only ash and broken metal. The sky above glowed faintly with the light of distant ships. She wrapped the cloth he had given her tighter around her shoulders as the cold bit through her fur. Suddenly the ground shook with a low rumble. Her ears twitched, and she froze. It was not artillery this time. The sound was heavier, rhythmic, like footsteps. She turned her head and her breath caught. Through the haze, towering machines marched. War mechs, their steel frames glinting in the dim light, weapons mounted on their arms. They were her people's design, machines of pure destruction, built to crush resistance without mercy. The girl's chest tightened. "We can't fight those, not even you." The human's visor tilted toward the machines, his stance tightening. He did not answer immediately. She could almost feel the calculations in his silence, the weight of choice pressing down on him. Finally he spoke. "Then we don't fight. We move." He pulled her with him, guiding her low against the ground, slipping through the broken wreckage for cover. Each step was careful, every breath quiet. The machines thundered closer, their searchlights sweeping across the battlefield like the eyes of predators. Her heart pounded as one of the beams swept dangerously near them. She pressed herself against the human, her tail coiling tight, her claws digging lightly into the ash. The mech paused, its heavy metal foot crushing stone where they had stood seconds before. The human's hand covered hers for a brief moment, grounding her, steadying her panic. His calm presence was like a shield, even against machines that towered above them. At last the mechs passed, their thunder fading into the distance. She let out a shaky breath, her body trembling with both relief and disbelief. She turned to him, her golden eyes wide. "You are not afraid," she whispered. He shook his head. "I am. I just don't let it control me." Her chest tightened again. Fear was something her people never admitted. To confess it was weakness. Yet here was a human, unashamed, turning fear into strength. She realized that was what made him different. Not the armor, not the weapons, but his spirit. She lowered her gaze, her voice soft. "If I live through this, it will only be because of you." He paused at her words, then said quietly, "No. You'll live because you still have something worth living for." The girl's eyes widened, her heart stirring in ways she had not felt before. She wanted to ask what he meant, to understand how he saw her when she barely understood herself. But the words caught in her throat. Instead, she simply walked beside him, her steps lighter now. The war still raged around them, but for the first time she did not feel like a soldier or an outcast. She felt like someone who mattered. The ruins thinned as dawn began to creep across the battlefield. Pale light broke through the smoke-filled sky, painting the wreckage in gray and gold. The alien girl's steps were slower now, her wounds pulling at her with every movement. Yet she kept walking beside the human, refusing to be left behind. He moved with the same calm strength as always, scanning the horizon with sharp eyes. The fire in his movements never wavered, even after hours without rest. She wondered how humans could endure so much. She had been taught that her kind were the stronger species, yet here she was, alive only because of him. The silence between them felt heavier than before, carrying unspoken questions. At last she broke it. "If your soldiers find us, they will kill me. You know this." He nodded once. "Yes." Her ears twitched. "Then why don't you leave me? Why carry this risk?" He stopped walking and turned toward her. The pale light touched his visor, hiding his face but not the weight of his words. "Because your life matters." Her chest tightened. She searched his tone for hesitation but found none. He said it with the same certainty he carried in every step, as if the truth was too simple to doubt. No one had ever said such words to her, not her commanders, not her people. Before she could reply, a sharp crack echoed through the air. A shot. The ground beside them sparked as metal shattered against stone. Her ears snapped upward. She knew that sound. A sniper. "Down!" The human shouted, pulling her into cover behind a broken wall. Dust sprayed around them as another shot slammed into the rubble. Her heart pounded as she pressed close to him. She could smell the faint scent of steel and ash clinging to his armor. His body shielded hers as he peered carefully over the stone. His voice was steady. "They're hunting us." She trembled. "Your people?" He paused before answering. "Maybe mine, maybe yours, it doesn't matter." The shots came again, striking closer. The human shifted quickly, dragging her deeper into the ruins. Each time she stumbled, his arm steadied her. Each time she faltered, he pulled her forward. She felt the certainty in him, even as death hunted them with every step. At last, they reached the shadow of a collapsed tower. He pulled her inside, pressing her gently against the wall. His visor turned toward her, his voice low but firm. "Stay here. Don't move." Her golden eyes widened. "You're going after them?" "Yes." Fear gripped her chest. "You can't. You'll be killed." His tone did not change. "If I don't, You will. Her hands tightened around his arm. She wanted to beg him not to go, to tell him her cries had already cost too much. But her voice broke before the words could form. She looked at him, her eyes wide with unspoken fear. For a moment, he was still. Then, to her shock, he lifted his helmet just enough to meet her eyes with his own. She saw them clearly now, sharp human eyes full of fire and resolve. I will come back, trust me. The helmet slid shut, and before she could stop him, he was gone, slipping into the ruins like a shadow. The alien girl pressed herself against the cold wall, her chest trembling. Every second felt like an eternity as the sound of distant gunfire echoed. She closed her eyes, clutching the fabric he had given her the night before. For the first time, she realized she did not only want him to protect her, she wanted him to return, for herself. Minutes stretched endlessly. Then, through the smoke, his figure appeared again. His steps were steady, though his armor carried new scars. The gunfire had stopped. He stood before her once more, his voice calm as if nothing had changed. You're safe. Tears stung her eyes, though she forced them back. She had not been saved. She had been chosen, and that truth frightened her more than any weapon. The human returned to her side as the sun broke fully across the horizon. The battlefield stretched endless before them, painted in gray smoke and red flame. The alien girl stood unsteadily, her wounds burning, but she refused to collapse. Not now. Not when he had promised to return to her and kept that promise. She looked at him with wide golden eyes, her voice trembling. You came back. He nodded, his visor reflecting the rising light. I said I would. Her throat tightened. Promises were rare among her kind, and rarer still to be kept. She wanted to speak, to tell him the weight of what that meant, but the words tangled inside her. Instead, she simply walked beside him, her silence louder than any confession. They moved carefully through the ruins. The world around them was far from safe. Both their armies had begun sweeping across the plains again, searching for survivors. The air vibrated with the low hum of engines, the crack of weapons in the distance. It was only a matter of time before they were discovered. Her ears twitched at the sound of voices ahead. She froze, pulling at his arm. Through the haze, figures appeared. This time it was his people, human soldiers, moving in formation, their weapons raised, their eyes scanning for threats. Her chest clenched. If they saw her, there would be no mercy. She pressed close against the wall, her golden fur bristling, her tail curling tight. She whispered, "They will kill me. You can't stop them all." The human turned his head toward her. His voice was calm but firm. "Then they won't. See you." He guided her into the shadows of the ruins, keeping his armored body between her and the patrol. His hand rested on her shoulder, steadying her trembling form. She could feel the weight of his choice. He was hiding her from his own kind, risking everything. The soldiers passed close, their boots striking against the stone. One of them paused, turning his head toward the ruins. The girl's breath stopped. Her claws dug lightly into the human's arm as panic rose in her chest. The soldier squinted into the shadows, his weapon lifting slightly. The human did not move. His body remained still, his hand pressing gently against her shoulder to keep her calm. After a long moment, the soldier turned away, following the rest of his squad. The sound of boots faded into the distance. She let out a shaky breath, her knees weak. Her golden eyes lifted to him. "You protected me from them again, even your own people." He nodded once. "I told you, I'll protect you from anyone." Her chest ached at his words. She realized then how dangerous their bond had become. If his people learned what he had done, he would be branded a traitor. If hers discovered her trust in him, she would face the same fate. Yet neither of them pulled away. As they moved again, her thoughts grew heavier. She could feel something building inside her, something stronger than fear. It was trust, yes, but more than that. A pull she could not explain. She glanced at him, at the way he moved with unshaken resolve, his armor scarred, yet his spirit unbroken. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. Why do you hear me when no one else does? He paused, his visor tilting slightly toward her. His answer was simple, yet it struck her like lightning. Because I was listening. Her throat tightened, her eyes stinging. She turned her face away, not wanting him to see the tears she could no longer hold back. All her life her voice had been ignored, dismissed as weakness. And now in the middle of war, a human had given her what her own people never had. He had listened. The ground shook suddenly, pulling her back to the present. Far in the distance, both armies clashed again, their roars and explosions filling the air. The war was closing in around them, and soon there would be no hiding. The human placed his hand lightly on her shoulder, steady as always. We keep moving. Whatever comes, we face it together. She nodded, though her chest trembled. She was no longer just surviving with him. She was no longer just being saved. She was standing at the edge of a choice that would change both their lives forever. The battlefield roared louder than ever. Dawn's pale light had given way to burning skies as both armies clashed in full force. The alien girl stood beside the human in the shadows of broken ruins, her golden fur streaked with ash, her body weak but her spirit burning with something new. She looked at him, her chest tightening. We cannot hide forever. When they find us, there will be no escape. The human's visor turned toward her, steady and unshaken. Then we won't escape. We endure. His words struck deep inside her. He had repeated them so many times, yet each time they grew heavier, more real. She had seen him endure against beasts, against soldiers, against his own kind. And somehow she believed him. The sound of marching grew closer. Shadows loomed through the smoke, her people advancing from one side, his soldiers from the other. Two armies moving toward the same ground, toward them. Her ears twitched, her heart pounding. If they find us together, they will, he interrupted calmly. And then we choose. The girl stared at him. Choose what? His answer was simple, but it shook her more than the trembling ground. Whether we fight for them, or for each other. The soldiers emerged from the smoke at the same time. Her people and his, weapons raised, eyes locked on the two figures standing in the ruins. A silence fell, heavy with confusion and rage. One of her commanders stepped forward, his voice booming in her language. You stand beside an enemy? You shame your blood? Step away from him or die with him. Her chest ached. These were her people, her kin, the ones she had once sworn to follow. Yet when she had cried for help, none had answered. Only the human had. Then came the voices of his soldiers, sharp and cold in their tongue. Step aside, Lieutenant. She's the enemy. She dies here. The human's weapon lifted steady, his body shielding hers once more. His voice was calm but unbreakable. She is not your enemy. She is mine to protect. The air trembled as both sides shouted. Weapons clicked, ready to fire. The girl's breath caught in her throat. She knew this moment would end in blood. Her hand tightened on his arm. They will kill us both. He turned his head slightly, just enough for her to see his eyes through the visor's faint glow. Not if we stand together. For the first time, she did not feel fear at those words. She felt strength. She stepped forward beside him, her voice rising louder than it ever had before. No more, she cried in her language, her ears standing tall, her golden eyes blazing. I will not fight for those who cannot hear my voice. I will fight for the one who did. The armies hesitated. Confusion rippled through their ranks. The human soldiers stared as if betrayed, the alien warriors as if she had lost her mind. Yet in that moment she felt more alive than ever. The human's voice joined hers, steady and clear. If you want her, you'll have to take us both. The standoff burned like fire in the air, fingers tightened on triggers, blades gleamed in the smoke. And then before the first shot could fall, something unexpected happened. The soldiers lowered their weapons, slowly, one by one, as if neither side could find the courage to strike first. Perhaps it was the sight of an alien girl and a human, standing shoulder to shoulder. Perhaps it was the strange truth in their defiance. Whatever the reason, the war paused on that field, the guns silent, the fire crackling between them. The girl's chest heaved as she turned to the human. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. "You heard me when no one else did, and now I will never stop hearing you." He lowered his weapon, his hand finding hers. His voice was quiet, but in that silence it carried farther than the roar of battle. Together. And for the first time since the war began, the battlefield was not filled with cries of hate, but with the quiet, unshaken promise between a human and an alien girl who had finally been heard.